See how that goes. Amazing.
Yeah, we're good.
We're good. So welcome here, everybody. We're going to get started just right now. It's just after 1. Welcome here. This is a Heartwood Healing Center webinar. So if you've been here a couple moments, I'll just say some of those housekeeping things one more time. So a Zoom webinar is different from a Zoom meeting. So if you are participating, you won't see your face. So your face or your video is not um, visible at all to anyone. So, and there's also not a chat. So if you want to participate, feel free to look at our question box. Bryn will have an eye on that as we go along. And so you'll just be seeing our two faces. So in that way, feel free to just get up, use the washroom, grab a beverage if you want at any time. We can't see you. The other thing is that this is being recorded, and so eventually it will be up on our Heartwood Healing Center website under webinars if you ever want to reference this again. So welcome here. It's Thursday, December 7th, and we'll just get right into it. We're going to begin with a land honoring today. Heartwood Healing Center is on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabewaki, Dene, Michifpei, Nihinawa, and Oceti-Sakowin peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We're privileged and honored to do our work here, but we recognize that we're an agency and 2 individuals who work with healing trauma. We can't talk about trauma without recognizing here the historical and present impacts of trauma to the Indigenous peoples on these lands. So that's how we want to begin today. Then we'll move into some introductions. So a little bit about us. My name is Catherine and my pronouns are she and her. I'm a therapist in our long-term program here at Heartwood Healing Center. In terms of my introduction to this topic of winter mental health, I've often struggled in winter and know that feelings of tiredness and loneliness are something to expect for me when the seasons change. In preparation for this webinar, I committed to lunchtime walks for 20 minutes each lunch hour during my Monday to Friday here at the office as a way of incorporating in some sunlight and fresh air and movement into my days. As our webinar unfolds, you'll see why I would try something like that. And there's a chance to reflect individually on things that might boost your energy and mood at the end of the webinar. So I'll pass it over to you, Bryn.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, my name is Bryn. I use she, her pronouns. I am an MSW student for this year at Heartwood, and then also a little new development that wasn't in the PowerPoint at the time that we made it, but I recently came on as a long-term therapist. So I'm doing a little bit of short-term, a little bit of long-term, kind of have a dual student and employee role here. So for folks who are maybe joining and they're like, I've never seen your face before. Well, maybe we'll cross paths a little bit more. I am really grateful actually that I was asked to do this because I myself can use these reminders. Like I'm not coming at this from any place of like, I've got it all figured out. I think winter is a really challenging time. And so it was helpful to just be like, oh yeah, what are things that I can do to keep myself well um, in these. Well, it's kind of weird because it's warm outside right now. Like
Mhm.
it feels like spring, but
Mhm.
I know that cool weather and maybe snow is coming. So we've got a
Mhm.
lot of more dark days coming up. So yeah, hopefully this helps some people like it helped me.
So here's a presentation overview for our webinar today. Bryn will start by talking about winter blues and seasonal affective disorder causes and symptoms. So more of a diagnostic lens first. Then we're going to talk a little bit about hormones, serotonin, and mood. Then we'll add a trauma-informed outlook because we're all accessing this from the lens of the Heartwood Healing Center. Then we'll talk about prevention and coping. So, the role of routines for us, a slide about feeling the feelings that go along with this time of year, maybe, and perspectives on taking care of yourself. And then we'll have a personal reflection activity at the end. So, some optional participation just on your own. And that will be a mood boost break plan. Then we'll have time for questions. I think Bryn has an eye on our question panel, hopefully. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them there and we'll address them towards the end of our webinar. And then we have a quick survey at the end before we all go and continue on our days from here. So that's our overview for now.
Okay. Yeah, so like Catherine mentioned, we're just going to start with kind of a general overview of definitions and terms. So people might be familiar with the concept of winter blues. So this is a general term. This isn't a clinical diagnosis. This isn't something that's in maybe like the DSM, if you're familiar with that, or this isn't something that you would be diagnosed with by like a mental health professional, but it's just kind of a state that a lot of people feel throughout the winter months. It is temporary, so it may only last a few days, maybe weeks at a time at most, but it's not going to be so persistent and impact day-to-day functioning for a long period of time. Um, it's most common around this time of year. So when the days get shorter, it's darker earlier, and it's chillier earlier on in the evening. And for people who are in Winnipeg, we know that we can get pretty cold. So it's really common that, yeah, it would just sort of change our day-to-day functioning. But winter blues are generally managed with minor lifestyle modifications and it'll generally resolve itself. And in the research that we did, it's experienced by approximately 15% of Canadians. And so then moving into seasonal affective disorder or SAD, which people might be more familiar with. Maybe you can identify with this, or maybe you've actually been diagnosed with this by a professional. So this is something that would be clinically diagnosed by a clinician. The symptoms of it are more similar to depression or depressive episodes of other mood disorders. So sometimes it can be challenging to know, is this sad? Is this other mood disorders that I maybe typically experience or that is part of my mental health journey? But in a study that I found, there's just like a simple definition, a type of recurring major depression with a seasonal pattern. Um, so it might look a lot like your depression, but it's typically in the winter months. Um, and so typically experienced by a smaller percent of the population, and that could be for a lot of different reasons, maybe access or just the severity of symptoms, but approximately 2 to 3% of the population will be diagnosed with SAD specifically. Okay. And so moving into looking at causes. So what are the causes? So something that was pretty consistent in the research that we were doing is that scientists and psychologists and people in this field don't fully know the cause of SAD. There are some consistent themes that we're going to talk about, but generally shorter days and less sunlight trigger chemical changes in the brain, which can lead to symptoms of depression and low mood. So some of those things that we have on the slide here could just be your biological clock is changing. If we want to get really technical, I guess the term would be your circadian rhythm. So your like sleep wake cycles are just different because there's less light, and that kind of cues to us, oh, it's dark outside, it's time for me to sleep. And so your internal clock is changing. I kind of like to think of the example of like, if we were bears, we would just be allowed to like store up a bunch of food and go hibernate. But we're human beings in this society where we're still expected to like work and be productive and do all the things. And so, yeah, it can be a challenge for a lot of people. Um, and then some of the more like chemical biological causes, and Catherine's going to expand a little bit more. But a drop in serotonin levels can affect mood. Loss of sunlight or reduced sunlight can cause a drop in serotonin, and that can also contribute to feelings of depression. Um, and then some people may or may not be familiar with melatonin. It's a naturally occurring sleep hormone, and that regulates our sleep and wake cycles. Some people might take melatonin like in pill form or drop form, or that might be something that people use to help with things like insomnia or other sleep conditions. But the body does naturally make more melatonin when it's dark outside because it's cueing to our body like, oh, I need more sleep. And then another potential cause is there's a deficit in vitamin D, because the body produces more vitamin D when exposed to sunlight. And then this isn't on the slide, but interestingly, as I was like doing research, there's also studies that show that people who live farther from the equator, like in the northern hemisphere, are just more likely to experience this because there's just less sunlight. And in Sweden, 90% of people will experience sad. So I thought that was like, oh, another way of being like, okay, it's not like there's nothing wrong with me. It's like, oh, just my geographic location also can be a potential cause. And so moving into symptoms, and again, this is not an exhaustive list. Everyone's experience is going to be so different. And if there are participants in our chat with lived experience and want to just type in something that maybe isn't on this list or say like, yes, that happens for me, by all means, feel free to add anything. I'll keep my eye there. But again, just kind of in doing research, these were sort of the common things that came up. So increased sleep, daytime drowsiness or problems with sleep, loss of interest in things that you would maybe formerly found to be enjoyable or just that you enjoy doing, withdrawing socially, maybe increased sensitivity to rejection, maybe experiencing higher irritability and anxiety. Um, and some of these things can also lead to feelings of guilt, maybe even hopelessness if we're losing interest in things that we feel like we should or want to be doing. That can then contribute to, oh, I feel like I should be doing more, even if our body is saying like, no, slow down, because it's a time to do that. Maybe decreased ability to focus or concentrate, trouble thinking clearly, potential for an increased appetite. There is also, again, potential symptom could be weight gain, but I do just kind of want to add a caveat to that, that this would be maybe like unexplained or significant amounts that would cause for health concerns, but also to recognize that, weight fluctuations are normal, especially with age, and it can also be a normal response to changing of seasons and decreased activity levels. So yeah, definitely want to kind of put that lens when we're looking at things around weight and food. And then potentially other physical problems like headaches. So again, not an exhaustive list. This might not be true for everyone, and there might be more, but these are just kind of like the common things that came up when we were doing research.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Bryn. And I appreciate what you were saying about some of the hypotheses or some of the guesses behind what's going on when we are experiencing these symptoms. So we're going to add a piece about the feel-good hormones that we all have naturally. And then we're going to zoom in a little bit to the role of serotonin to give ourselves a bit of a background as to the mechanisms of what's going on. So more generally here, hormones are chemical messengers and neurotransmitters, which means that they send information through the bloodstream and between nerve cells. And with neurotransmitters, what we mean is they're sending information to the brain. So the four here that we have is dopamine, the rewarding chemical. That's why there's a cupcake there to represent that. It might be felt when it comes to completing a task, doing self-care activities, eating food, or celebrating little wins. There is some research that says that dopamine now they're finding is more about the anticipation of reward rather than the achievement of reward. So kind of the excitement of anticipation that goes with that. Then we have serotonin, the mood stabilizer. This really evens out and creates positive moods for us. We can increase this again with sun exposure, things like meditating, running, or being in nature. Those are a couple suggestions. Then we have endorphins, which are considered like a painkiller. They reduce stress and pain in the body. They can be increased through things like laughing and exercising. And then we have oxytocin, which sometimes people call the love hormone, but it's something that's created and fosters feelings of closeness and relaxation. So that might be experienced when we're hugging our loved ones, playing with a beloved pet, or playing with a baby, or even just physical touch, things like holding hands, if that feels good to us. So, we want to talk a little bit more about serotonin. And I'll just add that this is about, like Bryn was saying earlier, reminding ourselves that it's not our fault. There is some mechanisms behind what we might be experiencing. So, the chemical makeup of serotonin is also called 5-HT. So, that's what's represented here in this little diagram of what serotonin looks like chemically. Uh, Serotonin in particular is made in the gut and the brain, and it travels through the bloodstream. And one thing that I found interested was that it's made or built in our body through a protein called um, tryptophan. So that's one of the 23 amino acids. I think 23. We'll go with that. Um, this is our feel good chemical again that contributes to emotional stability, happiness, and feelings of calm. But it has more of a role than just mood. So it can impact our memory, our experiences of fear, our stress response, our digestion, things like addiction and addictive behaviors, sexuality, sleep, breathing, and temperature. So when we think back to some of those symptoms that Bryn was listing that go along with the winter blues, but also just depression in general, these are some of the things that are impacted by serotonin. So there's an echo there. We can increase serotonin through medication. So many antidepressants called SSRIs target serotonin in the body, and it can also be increased through lifestyle factors. We wanted to add here a trauma-informed outlook because of us coming to this as trauma mental health professionals. So we want to remind ourselves as we go about this presentation that for those of us who have experienced trauma or any situation in which our needs have gone unmet, we may have learned to minimize our own needs and emotions. So when we look back to the idea of when Bryn said about 15% of the population experiences winter blues, that number might be larger when we think that for many of us, we're used to minimizing our own negative experiences. Part of a healthy childhood development is learning the importance of routine. So when we think of healthy parenting, we think of things like bedtime routines, mealtime routines. But if we grew up in unstable home environments, we might still be working on developing these routines for ourselves in adulthood. That might be what healing or moving forward looks like for us. And that's part of too of how we manage our mental health in winter. So routines might already be something that you're working on, and so this is not necessarily easy, and we really want to acknowledge that today.
And yeah, with that trauma-informed outlook coming into the idea of prevention and coping, recognizing that this might be really challenging and it might feel really daunting, or not even knowing where to begin, and that's okay. But hopefully with this doing this webinar, we can provide some tangible things that feel realistic to people that are like, okay, the research says these are some things that that work, or sometimes it's just trial and error, trying things on. It's like going shopping. trying things
Mhm.
on. If it doesn't fit, put it back. Um, that's like a lot of the process of mental health and coping is like figuring out what your specific needs are, because there is so much information out there. So these again are just some ideas. I'm looking at the chat. There hasn't been any questions or anything, but if you have ideas, suggestions, things that you've done, things that you've tried, by all means, put them in there and we'll share. But these were kind of the consistent things that we found. So number one, exposure to light. So like Catherine said, taking a lunch hour walk while it's still light out. Um, I unfortunately don't have a window in my office, so it was a good reminder for me to just like go somewhere where there is light naturally. Um, kind of any way that you can during your day. Um, People might be familiar with light therapy or phototherapy or like sad lamps, light boxes, whatever you kind of know them to be. But sitting in front of a light box for approximately 30 minutes a day can be very, very helpful. And that's kind of considered like the first thing that people should try if they notice that they um, really struggle with the darkness. Um, some other things like if it's available, psychotherapy, so some CBT skills, just maybe challenging some of our thoughts, like we've been saying. We can kind of get stuck in self-blame and why am I like this? What's wrong with me? But recognizing like, oh, there's something chemically going on, or just because I live really north, it's going to be cold. And so just doing some of that fact checking. Um, in some cases, medications like SSRIs, like Catherine mentioned, can be a really helpful tool for people. It's, there's hopefully not a shame or a stigma about needing just this tool. And again, going to be so different for each person and based on your needs. But sometimes it's just needed for different like literal and metaphorical seasons of life. um, so exercise, trying to get healthy and balanced meals, taking supplements like vitamin C and D can also be ways to cope. And then self-help. So that could look like so many different things. It could be like attending webinars like this. It could be accessing community mental health support groups. Like the Mood Disorders Association of Manitoba has groups. So however you connect, could be volunteering. So whatever that looks like. Um, and of course, just because we are coming at this from Heartwood Healing Center, professional counseling, we do know that, wait lists are long and there's definitely a lack of resources, but hopefully by engaging in things like this, there's a little bit of hope. And we've got someone in the chat saying, I have my sad lamp or my light on right now. Thanks for reminding me to turn it on. There you go. So yeah, again, if there's other ideas or things that people have done that are helpful, yeah, feel free to share. Um, Another thing that I came across when I was looking up stuff is aromatherapy. Like there's different scents that boost mood, maybe like citrus or vanilla. So yeah, lots of different things that we can try. And more tools, things to offer to some folks here. So, like Catherine mentioned, routine is really important, and also acknowledging that even if we're adults, it's totally okay if we are still figuring out what our routine is. Like I said at the beginning, I have not got this all figured out. I don't particularly have great like sleep hygiene and all that stuff. So these are suggestions and tools. But yeah, acknowledging that it's hard to remember to do all these things. So one of the things we can try is establishing a sleep routine. So to the best of your ability, try going to bed, waking up at the same or similar times every day, establishing rituals. So some people maybe will meditate before bed or they'll journal. They have their coffee make like it's ready to go and then they just wake up, press on, and then, there's so many different ways that you can make rituals for yourself. And then also making sure that your sleeping area is comfortable, free of distractions. Um, the blinds are how you like them. Maybe you need a fan, maybe you need a heater, maybe you need a weighted blanket. Like there's so many different ways that sometimes we don't even think of to even just make our sleeping routine um, better for us. And then another routine that, again, very challenging, we know, just building physical activity into your lifestyle. And this is not like go to the gym and lift weights and anything like that. It's being gentle on yourself and having compassion for yourself. I like the idea of like just find an activity that you enjoy and do it a lot. So if it's lunchtime walks, go on a walk. If it's doing yoga, a free YouTube video in your house, do that. If it's playing a sport, join a league. If it's bowling, I don't know, like
Mhm.
snowshoeing, like skating, whatever that is. Um, yeah, just physical activity, I think, looks a lot more diverse than I think we allow ourselves to think. Like, you don't have to have a gym membership to be physically
Mhm.
active. Oh, yes. Okay. Someone said, I recently started doing puzzles after supper and before bed, and I
Ah.
want to go to bed early when it's dark. It's helping fill that time now.
Mm.
Yeah, love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Puzzles. Yes, love that.
Mhm.
Just it's like right, spacing out that time. It's like, oh, okay, like it's 5:30 and it looks like midnight outside. I guess I can't go to bed yet. But yeah, just again, an activity that you like. Um, yeah, meal plan as best as you can. Um, cook or bake comfort foods, whatever that looks like for you. Um, and stay hydrated. Just drink water.
Mhm.
That's something that I forget to do. So, yeah, these are just some examples of little routines that you can integrate into your life to hopefully maybe not completely prevent winter blues, but just cope and have it be a little bit easier.
Mhm. Mhm. I love those ideas. I love those ideas. I have found that for myself, again, knowing that Bryn and I are not coming to this with any kind of expert lens at all. um, Something about taking a lunch break walk has been helpful to me because it's the only time I'm outside when it is daylight. Like it often feels like it's dark when I'm outside in the morning on the way to work, it's dark on my way home from work. And so getting some of that daylight time at lunch has been so helpful. Yeah. Also, I heard somebody say the other day, a client, that while we're probably familiar with setting an alarm to wake up, they had a alarm set every evening to start their bedtime routine. So at 10 or whatever, an alarm went off, and that just reminded them to start their bedtime routine. So I know we often think about setting up those morning routines, but by any means that you need to help yourself with the consistency, that's something to do in the evening as well. I thought that was a really interesting idea.
Hmm.
So here we also want to talk a bit about feeling our feelings. So, in discussing the biological and hormonal workings of mood earlier, we want to offer a reminder too that sadness is an important part of life that can't just really be reduced to brain chemistry. I know I was talking a little bit about hormones earlier, but that might not necessarily feel validating to what those things feel like. And keeping in mind that they are important things. Sadness is a valid response to darkness in our world. I have a quote here from the Canadian Mental Health Association, and this was originally written when COVID started, but it can be useful anytime, stating good mental health is not about being happy all the time, but having appropriate emotional and behavioral responses to stressors and life events. Hiding your emotions can prevent you from communicating with other people in your life and empathizing with what loved ones are going through. Sharing our very normal feelings of sadness, fear, and worry is particularly important during this unusual time of stress, uncertainty, and loss. So I really liked that. Where this researcher Jenkins talks about, if you hide your emotions, you're also not letting people in your life know that they can talk to you about those things, right? So if you are able to be honest with anybody in your life, saying that you're struggling with darkness or coldness with the change of seasons, you're also communicating with them that you understand what they might be going through if they're going through something similar. Trying to ignore emotions sometimes intensifies them. So it might be helpful to work to validate those emotions and connect with others instead. So sometimes you might have noticed, if you're angry and you try to stop being angry, it might just make the anger more intense. It'll feel like that part of you that's feeling that anger um, now feels it even more so because it has an important message for you about your values or about what you're experiencing right now. And so by acknowledging it, that emotion might feel a little bit calmer instead. So there's an example here from Harvard Health that talked about the benefits of crying. In this one study, they identified three different types of tears that we as human experience. And only one of those three is considered emotional tears, rather than, feeling things on our eyes that make us tear up as a response to wind or whatever. So with emotional tears, they remove stress chemicals and move them out of the body. And they're a way to combat repressive coping. So when we say repressive coping, that's also incredibly valid, but that's more of those strategies that cope by covering things up. So while there's a time and place for pushing feelings to the side and getting through, especially if we're in survival mode or need to just get through our day in whatever means necessary, we also benefit from allowing time and space to feel our emotions and again move some of those hormones and chemicals out of the body. So in terms of feeling our emotions, this might be in a therapy space or with a trusted support person in our lives, or it might just be alone, like while you're on a walk or while you're listening to some music that you really connect with, something like that. So feeling feelings really does have the potential to soften them and release them a little bit. Another thing to keep in mind is if you want to work on this, work working through with a therapist or with yourself, working through those core beliefs and societal messages that judge emotions. So we all likely feel some discomfort with the idea of sadness, for example. That might have been something that we learned early on in life if our caregivers, like our parents in childhood, wanted us to stop crying when we were sad. If you've heard that from a parent or a teacher, any guardian, it might have sent the message to us as children that crying and sadness are bad. That's part of our culture. And working through that core belief and changing that in yourself, recognizing that sadness has a place, might be helpful. So, this visual here from the movie Inside Out reminds us that all emotions have a place and a protective role in our lives. So, again, like I was saying earlier, sadness has information for us. It tells us what we value, it tells us what's important to us. And like that quote says, good mental health is not about being happy all the time, but having appropriate emotional responses to stressors and life events. So we want to acknowledge here too that sadness has a place. And so while it's great to establish routines and work with some of the changes in daylight and temperature and all that, feeling sadness might also be a way to release some of those feelings.
Yes, thank you so much for all of that. And it's such a good reminder um, for everyone. And I think even like us as people in the on like the helper side of things, like we're all just adjusting to seasonal changes and life is always happening. And I think, like I said at the beginning, it's like bears are allowed to just hibernate for like 5 months, but our society kind of, yeah, expects us, even though the days are shorter, there's still, work commitments and like for myself, school and just, there's all these things. So actually acknowledging like, oh, okay, it's okay to feel overwhelmed and like it's okay to slow down is really helpful. So similar um, theme of allowing yourself to just feel your feelings. Um, I like to kind of remind people like to move away from the idea that there's like good and bad feelings. Like they all have a meaning, they all have a purpose. And we just wanted to acknowledge the importance of self-care and self-compassion, and really taking care of ourselves. And we might need a little bit more TLC when we're experiencing winter blues or sad. Um, and for those who might not be familiar, there's I believe she's a psychologist, but she's a self-compassion researcher, Kristen Neff. And I thought this quote that I found was just really nice. So, self-compassion involves acting the same way towards yourself when you're having a difficult time, fail, or notice something that you don't like about yourself. Instead of just ignoring your pain, you stop to tell yourself, this is really difficult right now. How can I comfort and care for myself in this moment? So, on that theme of comforting yourself and taking care of yourself, this is, again, just some suggestions that were available when we were doing research, a little bit of kind of our own thoughts, and again, share in the chat. What you do to kind of take care of yourself or practice self-care in the winter. Some ideas are to treat yourself. So maybe get a weekend getaway. And I know it's hard because with expenses and things, it's hard to think of things that don't cost money. But I do have a resource from one of our colleagues that I can share in the chat. But yeah, just plan something that's either for yourself or with someone that you really care about. Try free outdoor activities. The Forks is always a great place to just be during all seasons. I know a lot of people like to skate or walk on the river. Um, I'm sure those like hardcore winter people are pretty upset that it's December 7th and there's no snow and it's 5 degrees. But just being outside, um, doing and watching things that make you laugh. Laughter is super important. Um, Getting involved in the community, volunteering, and kind of getting outside of ourselves is a really good way to just give back and kind of get outside of our own. If we're feeling overwhelmed by sadness or um, winter blues. So there's always things coming up with the holidays like food hampers and cheer boards and just maybe people you know in your own life who struggle with um, this time of year. So just being involved in your individual community doesn't have to be anything formal or connected to a specific organization. Relying on your support system, so knowing who those people are that, like Catherine said, like when telling someone that you are feeling sad or overwhelmed, knowing who those people are, that's going to be received well by and validated, because we know that kind of every person has a different capacity for different things. And so, yeah, knowing who your like top 3 people are who maybe like do reciprocate that is really helpful. Um, Listening to upbeat or cheerful music or just music that you like in general. A couple of us at Heartwood have a chat going just about like all the songs and artists and things that we like. And I think it's called like songs that give you life or something like that. So yeah, if you're into music, definitely make a playlist, share a playlist with a friend. Um, I am a big believer and supporter of taking a break from the news. Um, it's always overwhelming. It's always going to be there. Um, and that can also add to just this feeling of stress and heaviness. And so it is okay to just kind of turn that off and be mindful and present in our immediate community when the global stuff feels really, really loud and overwhelming.
Mhm,
And knowing that it is for a lot of people right now. So,
mhm, mhm.
um, and again, this is just like the very last little thing because recognizing and acknowledging that it's not available and accessible to all. Um, but if you can, maybe try going somewhere sunny, going on a beach somewhere. We are gonna do a little bit of visualizing and pretending, but if you are someone that can get on a plane and go to a beach, that will definitely help with some of the winter blues.
Mhm. So, for the last part of our webinar today, we're going to move into some individual self-reflection. So, you'll notice that we don't have a break built into this. So, if you need a break right now, by all means, feel free to take one. But we're just going to go right ahead. So, we wanted to dedicate this part of our webinar to this individual activity. So, if you do have a pen and paper available, feel free to pull one out to join in this. Sometimes it's helpful to put a plan into place when you're feeling settled or emotionally neutral, rather than trying to build it from scratch when you're already in a difficult moment. This might be a toolkit of ideas you reach for during a particularly bad day, or something you do on a regular basis as a means of prevention. Just like how it's not one day that makes for a bad winter, it's the cumulative effect or the adding on effect that has impact, both positive and negative. So, doing small things often can be a great approach. This one's really hard because sometimes we don't realize that we're experiencing some winter blues in connection to the darkness outside or the coldness. We don't realize that right away. We don't realize that on the first day when it's dark at 5 o'clock, but it's the cumulative effect. So it's that happening day in and day out for weeks on end that makes things so difficult. So to combat that, the idea of small things often is that you might try something and it might not be a magic wand. It might not feel perfect right away. It might not even feel like it helps. But if you'd like, feel free to just continue doing a different routine from your usual and being consistent with that and try to look a little bit broader. So, would this feel better if I did this every day for a week or for a month or for this winter? So, with that in mind, just keep small things often in mind. And what we're going to do is move into this activity for a mood boost plan. So I was inspired to do this because in the research, when we look at our nervous system, so how our bodies experience threat, that's our nervous system. Our nervous systems feel calm when we look at nature photos, not just being in nature itself. So the idea that there is something that we can replicate here, even if it's not something that we can create. So looking at a screensaver that has like your favorite place on it can still do something, even if you're not able to be in that favorite place. So with that in mind, feel free to bring out your pen and paper, and we're going to title this the Mood Boost Plan. So as we go ahead, feel free to, if you have any idea in particular that you really want to share, feel free to add that in the chat. But otherwise, we'll just do this personally. And Bryn and I will kind of do ours out loud here as we go. Um, so feel free to write down number one, what can I look at? So, what is something that you enjoy seeing visually that boosts your mood? This could be as simple as, if you have a phone or a computer, like taking a look, Googling your favorite piece of art and making that your screensaver. Finding a piece of art that makes you really happy, that might be something that you want to do. And then every time you look at it, feels a little bit positive. As therapists, we often have art on our walls, and that's not by accident. Our environment really does matter. So as you do this, feel free to just jot down a couple things where seeing them visually might boost your mood. Do you have any ideas of what those would be for you, Bryn? Like favorite color or art or
Yeah,
whatever it might
it's
be?
just so funny. I'm scrolling through my phone right now. I'm like, my screensavers are just like random pictures of art that I really liked. I'm like, this like colorful floral
Yeah.
thing. Um, I don't have it here, but my personal computer, my screensaver is a sunset from Winnipeg Beach, like right along the boardwalk, which is a
Mhm.
place that I frequent in the summer, and it's just somewhere that I'm always feeling relaxed and at peace. And yeah, so just opening my computer and seeing that visual of a sunset is like, oh yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And that's perfect, that idea of small things often. So, just the idea that anytime you look at your phone or whatever it might be, you get that reminder of a positive summer memory. And so as our whole group here, everyone participating, as you're doing this, these might feel like things you know already, but getting them in one place and making them a part of your week or your month might be helpful. So again, take a few minutes for that. I know as I was thinking about it, it was things like pictures from favorite trips and things like that. I also realized I'm here at the office today and my computer screensaver is just like the default Microsoft Word one. I've never taken the time to
Me
put in a
neither.
good one, and it's time to do it, right? Because it makes a difference.
Yeah.
I put up art on the walls in my office, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So we're going to move on to the next one. So what can I listen to? Take a moment, everybody, to jot down some things um, that when you listen to them, boost your mood or your energy levels. Could be music or playlists or albums that you really love. If you want to take it one step further, if you're someone who enjoys singing or humming, if you enjoy that, it is great for the nervous system. It can be a really calming or grounding thing that makes you feel more in the present. So, just things that you like to sing to yourself, you can include that there.
Mm-hmm. Do you have like a winter playlist or just like music that you kind of go to?
I'm trying to I'm trying to think. It's a good question. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I listen to a lot of podcasts and
Yeah.
that's a different feeling because it's
Mm-hmm.
words, but like the mood of music could be really important.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm a big podcast person. Like if I'm getting ready or just like cooking or doing dishes, like I always like to have a podcast kind of in the background.
Mhm,
Um, but if I'm doing an assignment or at my desk here doing notes or something, I do like to have just kind of music on.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, music plays an important role in our lives. Like even thinking about us in society, things like weddings and funerals, they often have music as a component to it. So I think we're all aware on some level about how emotionally connected we are to music. So just jot down a couple things. Next, we'll move on to what can I smell? So, this might seem funny, but we do include smell here because scent is very strongly associated with memories, and it's also very strongly associated with hormonal changes. So you might be aware that when people are pregnant, sometimes they have a different sense of smell, and that's due to some of those hormone shifts or hormone fluctuations. But that's something that we can all learn from. So keeping in mind that scent really does have a role to play for us. So what kind of scents are meaningful to you? Just thinking about that.
Um, yeah,
Could
just as sorry,
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say just as people are jotting things down, someone in the chat for the number two had said nature sounds.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, smell. I feel like all of my smell like mood boost is food related, like
Yeah.
coffee, baking,
Mhm,
like
mhm,
cinnamon, cookies.
mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Mhm,
A lot of people will say like bonfires. Um, Maybe there's like a person in your family that has like a like a specific scent or like a perfume that they wore, or I don't know, like
Hmm.
there's just like grandma smell. Like
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
can literally be anything that
Hmm.
just yeah activates that um I mean, not to get too technical, but if we're thinking of, yeah, nervous system and vagus nerve, like getting into that place of calm,
Hmm.
sense is one way to do that. Oh, someone in the chat. Oh, never mind. That was the old one.
So next, feel free to jot down here, what can I taste? So this might be something just to mix up your routine. So things like, would I feel a little bit more alert if I had a piece of gum right now? Could be something like that. Or if I made herbal tea that tasted delicious to me. It could also be something like, what might I want to eat today or in the coming days that feels comforting to me? Could be more something like that. So like, what do I need to do at my next meal time that will bring me a sense of comfort and really being mindful of that. It's just an idea.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Do you have like a meal or a snack that you go to when you want to boost your mood or energy?
Well, I think it's often things like coffee. Like I think even later in the day, having decaf coffee or something
Mm.
like that, it's not just about the coffee, but just about how happy I feel with the ritual. So that's
Hmm.
a big one for me for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's gonna say all of mine. It's similar, like
Hmm. Hmm.
just taste, like similar to scents. Yeah, that just like bring a sense of happiness. And but then sometimes it's like, okay, I know that if I just eat a piece of fruit and have some vegetables, I will be more energetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you're talking on a couple levels there, not just what tastes good, but also what do I want to consume that I know will make me feel the way I want to feel. So
Hmm.
that aspect of it too, for sure.
Yeah.
So the next one here is what can I touch or feel? So this could be a couple different things. It could be something like what kind of ways do I want to move my body? So things like gentle stretching. There's all kinds of things for this category. So, for example, for me, I know I often, if I'm feeling stressed or feeling tired, I hold a lot of tension in my face. So, I am someone where I will get these worry lines right here, and I will feel all kinds of tension right there. And so, it really helps to just massage there, or just massage right beside your ears at your jaw point, and just notice there if there's some tension there that might be helpful. So that's why I have face massage on there. Could
Mm.
be things like if you're sitting by a desk, sitting indoors, doing some gentle stretching, rolling your shoulders back. If you want to try that right now, I know I'm sitting, so rolling my shoulders back feels really good. It also could be things like changing the temperature. So getting a one of those microwavable magic heat bags and putting that in the microwave and then having it wherever you are, just as that warm, comforting feeling. I know when we were talking about um, hormones earlier, and we were talking about oxytocin. So that's that one, that hormone that brings us comfort, relaxation, closeness, that can also be enhanced with heat. So things like having a magic bag, a warm magic bag sitting on your lap can enhance things like that. Or alternatively, if you're feeling warm, just standing outside in the cold, that might boost your energy too. I had a lot to say there, Bryn. Any ideas?
Those are all really good ideas. Yeah, I was thinking what some of mine were. Like, yeah, as you were mentioning, like where you feel tension, mine's like always kind of like shoulders, upper back, like in between the shoulder blades. So just kind of like just dropping and
Mhm.
doing some like if I get home and doing a little bit of stretching and yeah, just getting some of those kinks out because sometimes, yeah, you can be like this all day and not even notice.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. In terms of what can I touch or feel, in some ways, just movement in general goes with this. So even just getting up, if you've been sitting for a while, say you're struggling and you've been watching TV for 4 hours, happens to the best of us, of course. Just standing up and walking around for a couple moments might change that mood or that energy level. So what could I do even for the next minute to move my body? Or even just, one movement based chore. I'm going to I don't know, vacuum for a minute just to get a little bit of movement in. That
Fold
might
some
feel good.
laundry.
Fold some laundry. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And all of these things might feel really small, but they do add up, especially if you are making them more frequent in your day. So it's worth experimenting with. Mhm.
Yeah, I was also thinking just for like the touch or feel sense, if you have like a comfort object or a grounding
Mhm.
object, or if you're someone that needs a fidget throughout the day, or like a lot of counselors here have like rocks or just something that's like soothing to the touch.
Mhm.
Could be like a really soft blanket, or maybe it's if you have kids, it's like their little blankie or something, just something that has like that a pleasing, calming texture.
Mhm. Mhm.
Pillow. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're on the last one here. If you're participating from wherever you are, for number 6, jot down what can I connect to emotionally? Um, it might be any person, place, or thing that makes you feel happy or understood, or it might be a matter of writing down a support statement. So just some kind of affirmation that feels true to you in this moment. I know I, at one point, ran a webinar here on self compassion. And just like you were saying, Bryn, we practiced as a group saying to ourselves, this is a moment of difficulty. This is a moment of suffering. And we practice just doing that. So, sometimes we're going about the day and things are not feeling easy. And we're trying to kind of push things down or minimize how it feels for us. We were just practicing saying to ourselves, this is a moment of suffering. This is a
Mm,
moment of suffering, seeing if that could feel validating.
mm,
Some other examples are, I'm doing my best. My feelings matter. Um, if you're someone who likes gratitude lists, I know that there's a big body of research talking about mood improvements with using gratitude day to day. But also, if that doesn't feel true to your emotional experience, don't write a gratitude list. Just if it fits for you. It's just an idea. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Um, I'm just I'm seeing if I can put things in the chat. I don't know
Okay.
that I can upload a document, so I
Mhm.
apologize because I promised earlier that a colleague had a whole list of free activities, and then I've been playing around and I don't know that I can upload, but I don't know.
Bryn, I think we can figure it out afterwards.
Okay.
Because everyone who's participating here, our agency does have your email address. So that can be
Perfect.
something that we figure out.
Yeah, because I was thinking, Kristen Neff, who I mentioned earlier, on her website, there's a whole list of self-compassion exercises to try.
Mhm.
Um, it's funny, I have affirmation cards in my office, and someone the other day was like, "Do affirmations really work?"
Yeah.
And I was like, depends on the person.
Mhm.
But I like how you were saying like it has to be authentic and true. Like we
Mhm.
can't force ourselves into thinking things that don't feel authentic and real.
Mhm.
So yeah, you don't have to be like, today I'm gonna be happy and I'm not gonna be sad about winter, because that might not be realistic. But
Mhm.
yeah, like if all I did today was get out of bed, brush my teeth, uh, watch something, took care of like a pet, that's a huge accomplishment.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Bryn, I like what you're saying there because hopefully, with this hour that we're spending together, we can all take from it that idea of um, responding to winter mental health in a way that feels authentic to us. And sometimes that's going to feel like, working on routines and boosting our serotonin. And sometimes it's going to look like just embracing the sad, um, and seeing who we can share that with. Yeah. So any of those experiences could be totally valid. So we'll give everybody just one more minute to jot down any last things you want to jot down. Thank you for participating. Even though we aren't seeing your faces, we feel your presence here. You might want to take this paper, whatever you wrote, and put it somewhere in your purse, in your working space, in your home, where you can draw upon it if you're struggling. These might seem like small things, but small things often can be a great approach to winter mental health. Yeah. So this marks the end of our scheduled time here in our webinar for today. So we want to thank you for attending. And at this time, if anybody has any more questions, we're going to take a moment to just keep that question box or chat box open. If anybody has any questions about anything that we've mentioned today, or something that you wished we mentioned. If you have anything that's specifically like feedback, we also have we have a time and place for that. So no worries, we'll get to feedback in a second. But we'll just let you take a moment, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to submit them and we can talk about them for a moment yet. On the screen, we just have some reminders of where we're located at our website. We'll have this recording up at some point, and there are other recordings there if you're curious and want to watch them. I know some of the topic. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, if you're somebody that is active or engaged in social media, I'm sure our engagement coordinator would love us to plug where we can be found. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. I believe there might be a Twitter profile somewhere. I don't know how many people are still using it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have Twitter.
Yeah.
Definitely Instagram.
Yeah.
And there's a reminder there of how to reach us or contact information if you're not already familiar. So we're going to keep our eye on the question box for another minute or so.
So far, no questions. Or if you don't have questions, if you just are thinking of something that you had in your coping list or on your mood boost plan that you're wanting to share, feel free. Oh yeah, so someone had said, "Thank you. I often feel I set the bar too low for myself. Now I see it's okay to have days like that." Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and appreciate you sharing that, because yeah, I think that's a really common thing, and we can, feel like we're not doing enough or we should be doing more.
Something we didn't necessarily mention yet, but keeping an eye on our social media use, because often social media only gives us other people's highlight reels, like their best moments. And so if we're not constantly having best moments, it can feel really invalidating when we are having really average or really sad days. And so keeping that in mind might be impactful. We didn't talk too much about that today, but something to think about.
There's another question Is there any research concerning the effect of circadian rhythm disorders such as delayed sleep phase disorder on SAD?
Oh, I'm not sure. I imagine they're related. The research might not have empirical evidence yet connecting them, but there might be some overlap for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am not familiar with anything specifically around that, but definitely something to seek out.
Mhm,
Um, Not a sleep specialist, not a neurologist or anything like that, but like based on the little bit of research that we did do to prepare, it would make sense to me that um, our sleep patterns would be impacted by seasonal changes. So
mhm,
yeah, I wish I had a more like concrete or expert based answer to that, but it's a good question.
Yeah.
Another area to just keep doing research on.
Mhm. Any last questions here? Or it could be sharing something that came up for you when you were doing that activity of jotting down a mood boosting plan. Anything left, everyone? Okay, so what we're going to do then is move into, I think, our last slide. So here we have a QR code for access to a survey about how you experienced this today, or you can use the link in your webinar. So this should be a live link, meaning that you can click it right in front of you and open it in a new tab. And this is just something to have pulled up. And then if you feel comfortable doing so, please do let us know what you think.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we really value feedback so that we know what people want to see. If there's other topics or things related that you're interested in learning about, we can hopefully accommodate those things.
Mhm. Mhm. The other thing is if for some reason you're not able to do that and just do it, like grab that link now and do it afterwards. The other thing you can do is that we can get it from our front desk staff here, and you could be provided that. Mhm. So, Bryn, anything left in the chat or question area?
Not that I'm seeing. Do you know if you as host can send in the chat to all attendees or no?
I Let's take a look. I don't think I can.
Okay.
It looks like it looks like you have.
Because I
Well,
don't know
maybe
if
it
it,
just said no, it just sends to panelists. Panelists.
because I
Okay.
had put that survey link in there for anyone who's having trouble, but I don't know if that was helpful or anyone got it.
Might
But
have
like, yeah,
just been between the two of us, Bryn.
we'll give all of our unbiased feedback
Yeah.
about ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, there's everything that was in the chat was mentioned or shared,
Mhm.
but it's still open if people are having some last minute kind of thoughts.
Mhm. So we'll just move on then, and we'll end. Here are some of our sources. Um, we can also, these will be up then when this webinar goes on our website. So you can take a look at those sources if you have any further questions. All
Mm-hmm.
right. So I want to thank everyone for coming today. Thank you so much for spending an hour with Bryn and myself. Again, thank you for participating. And we just wanted to recognize that we aren't coming from an expert based place. It's more experiential to us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you so much for participating. And we're going to end our webinar here. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.